How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 1000, and in this video we're going to focus on Invest 91L, which likely will become Tropical Storm Karl within the near future, and determine if this has a possibility of making landfall as a major hurricane, since we do have several depictions from the computer models depicting that this disturbance could make landfall as a major hurricane somewhere along Central America. We're going to determine what factors will play into the possibility that this will develop into a major hurricane as this continues to head further westward. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's begin by taking a look at the current water vapor imagery for Invest 91L at this time, and we do see that it has enhanced its convection a lot more than anticipated. What was initially anticipated from the computer models is that this would struggle to get a good deal of convection happening around this disturbance, but now we're seeing a lot more thunderstorm activity occur right around the center of circulation at this time, as we're seeing a lot more convergence with the air molecules around the surface, which is enhancing the wind speed, and as a result we should begin to see rotation over the next several hours once the thunderstorm activity begins to increase even more as a result of a higher level of convergence along the surface. And we're seeing that there isn't a lot of dry air, there isn't a lot of wind shear either. I was talking to you guys about an upper level low that was just to the north of it that was imposing a good deal of shear on the northern side of this storm, but we have seen that for today that wind shear has quickly subsided, since we don't see the outflow on the northern clouds really drift towards the north like yesterday, or at least as fast as yesterday. We do have some outflow clouds moving to the north, but isn't anywhere close to the magnitude that we saw yesterday, which certainly isn't good news. And we do see that this has a pretty open area to continue to strengthen as this heads further westward, which is very, very concerning. And now we're likely to see Tropical Storm Karl out of this, so it's something to keep in mind as this continues to head further westward. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear map, like I just said, the upper level low is now just north enough to where it isn't imposing a strong amount of wind shear anymore over the northern side of this storm. There is still at least some wind shear on the extreme northern portion, but it's far from enough to really disorganize the core of this storm, which is a little bit further southward, where you got the core is really only experiencing upper level winds right around the 10 knot range, which makes conditions for this storm to organize very favorable, which is definitely unfortunate, because this will pretty much accelerate the process this organizes and develops into a tropical storm and potentially a hurricane in the more long-term future. Now, take a look at what the computer models are stating as of today. Now, there's of course higher confidence that we're going to see a tropical storm, and based on that, the computer models have adjusted their forecasts where they're now more lenient on not only developing a tropical storm but a hurricane in the more long-term future. Let me just first show you guys the GFS model. Let's take a look at the humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. If I were to continue to move forward, we do see that there's a great deal of humidity throughout the southern Caribbean at this time and the northern South America area. And I did say that this high level of convection and thunderstorm activity around the southern Caribbean would inhibit this storm from strengthening, because there would be so much thunderstorm activity that all those thunderstorm clusters would be competing for the same limited amount of energy. So as a result, this disturbance wouldn't be able to absorb enough energy, because all these other thunderstorm clusters would take up a lot of the air molecules and divert it away from the tropical disturbance into the other thunderstorms that are occurring just so west of it. But it seems like since the storm has significantly enhanced its convection a lot more than anticipated, it seems like this disturbance is now powerful enough to where it'll be able to get a great deal of convergence happening around the center of circulation, despite the amount of thunderstorm activity that's just so west of it. So unfortunately, I don't think the amount of convection that's happening right around the Western Caribbean will be enough to stop this storm from strengthening into a tropical storm, which is definitely not good news. And if I were to continue to move forward, we see that the GFS model, I'd say, wants to develop this into a tropical storm right around the 72-hour mark, or around 3 days from now, where it's just south of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and just north of Aruba and Venezuela's. But so it's going to gradually intensify. This is going to be slow in strengthening into a tropical storm, most likely. However, we do have other depictions of computer models wanting to strengthen it a little bit faster, and it could be possible that at least this depiction of the GFS model may be a little bit outdated based on the latest information we've been receiving with Invest 91L, because of course it's trending a lot more than even the computer models anticipated. And if I were to continue to move forward, the GFS model takes a very scary depiction of Invest 91L, where it wants to strengthen this easily into a major hurricane, where we see the pressure drop down to 951 millibars just before it makes landfall somewhere between the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize. And of course, the southern Central American countries like Honduras and Nicaragua could get involved as well, which is only a very concerning scenario. However, if we were to take a look at the European model, the key differences at the European model does expect this storm to, for one thing, move quite a bit faster than the GFS model, because if I were to show you guys where the European model puts the storm at around the 5-day mark, it's already pretty much making landfall along the Nicaragua coast. But if I were to show you guys the GFS model at the same time period, it's not even longitude-wise at the Jamaica portion yet, which is a huge contrast when it comes to the speed of this storm. And this is due to several factors. For one thing is that the upper level winds are steering the European models scenario a little bit further southward than the GFS model, and that would mean that of course it will take less time to go in a straight line rather than take a turn northward. And typically when a tropical cyclone takes a turn, it typically does slow down because it's pretty much fighting against certain steering currents, and that's part of the reason why the GFS model is slower in taking this further westward, which could be concerning because the slower it moves, the more time it has to organize itself over water. So hopefully this storm doesn't move too slow to a point where it'll have a lot of time to really strengthen and organize itself before it makes landfall. We're just going to have to wait and see. But of course, the GFS model and the European model are quite a bit different at this time. GFS model taking a much stronger storm at landfall, and a storm that's quite a bit further northward than the European model, where the European model takes the landfall right around Nicaragua as maybe a high-end tropical storm or low-end hurricane. However, based on the fact that the GFS model was initially a little bit more correct in strengthening this a little faster, then the GFS model might be the more accurate scenario, which certainly won't be good news. But we need to see how this storm will maneuver itself over the next several days. So you're probably wondering what will determine the track and strength of this. So in terms of what will determine the track, one thing that we need to take a look at is of course the height anomaly, because main steering flow will be this ridge that's just to the north of it. And if I were to continue to move forward, and another key thing that will really determine the track is where that center of circulation, or where exactly the eye will develop as this continues to head further westward. Because of course, when we see a tropical disturbance organizing itself, it takes several days for the tropical disturbance to really find an area where the pressure is just low enough for the small center of circulation to develop, and where that convergence will be located. And of course, we don't really have a well-defined small center of circulation associated with this disturbance just yet. However, depending on where the center of circulation forms, that will play a major role in terms of the track of this. Of course, if the low were to develop a little bit further northward, then we should expect a northward track and potentially a slower track as a result. However, if this low pressure system were to develop further southward, we should expect a track closer to Nicaragua. So still a high margin of error between the two. Really all depends on where exactly the low develops. So if I were to show you guys, we do see that the GFS model wants to develop the center circulation further northward, but compare that to the European model. The European model develops the center circulation well further southward to where it pretty much hugs the Venezuela coast at this time, and of course that will play a big role in terms of the future of the track of this storm, where the European model pretty much just takes a straight southern track. And of course, another thing, we'll have to see how the ridging will build, because what I've noticed with the European model's depiction of the track of this storm, we do see that on the European model, I notice is taking a stronger ridge right around Central America. And of course, that would create a stronger northwesterly flow that would steer the storm further southward. But compare that to the GFS model at the 60-hour mark, we do see that the ridging is a lot weaker. So there's much more of an open opportunity for this to move a little bit further northward thanks to how weak this ridging is. And we do see that the ridging towards Central America is nearly non-existent, which would allow this storm to take a little bit further of a northward track. And of course, the ridge would adjust to where it would shift its wind direction from more of a northwesterly direction to more of a west to potentially southwest direction as it continues ahead further westward. So we're going to need to pay attention to how the ridging builds over the next several days to really determine the track of this, and of course where that well-defined center circulation will develop. It's likely we're going to see this develop within the next 5 days, so we should get a better idea, I'd say maybe as soon as this tropical storm develops, which is certainly possible within the next 48 hours. So I'll keep you guys updated if there's any major certainty changes with the forecast. Now, in terms of the strength forecast, of course, the land interaction will be a key we're going to be paying close attention to, because of course if this moves too far south, then it would come uncomfortably close to Venezuela and Colombia, to a point where this storm would weaken over land and stay disconnected from the very warm Caribbean waters for it to strengthen more as it heads further westward. But of course, if this were to take a northward track, it'll be completely over water to where it will have a much easier time to develop. And unfortunately, it does seem like there's going to be a lot of dry air ahead of this storm, and of course the wind shear will be extremely light as it heads further westward, which is another major concern. We do see that the wind shear is pretty much almost non-existent, and in fact we do see a little bit of an upper level high that's going to be right over this low pressure system, so that should increase the divergence, allow for a higher amount of convection to occur for this storm to intensify potentially even faster, which is definitely a major concern if this were the case, which will most likely be the case, that the wind shear and the dry air will be pretty much non-existent as it heads further westward. Again, what really will be the key is if it's able to attain enough energy in the midst of all this thunderstorm activity that's happening around it. We're going to have to wait and see if it'll organize itself fast enough, and sometimes it could be difficult for low pressure systems to do that when there's so much convection going on around it that's trying to pretty much diverge that energy away from the center of circulation. So we're just going to need to wait and see, but unfortunately it seems like if this were to develop a well-defined center of circulation, it has an open opportunity to potentially rapidly intensify, which is a major concern. However, I'd say for Central America, you should at the very least expect a tropical storm. It's still uncertain regarding where exactly this will go, but make sure to be aware of that possibility of flooding, and we could see something that could peak into major hurricane status, which is definitely a major concern. But I'll keep you guys updated if there's any changes in the forecast. Now, taking a look at the chance that this will develop into a tropical cyclone, a 60% chance within the next 48 hours and a 80% chance within the next 5 days. So more likely than not, between the next 48 hours, we will see tropical storm Karl, which is definitely very concerning. And of course, the northern portion of South America as well as Central America, you need to be on high alert with this tropical disturbance. And of course, we now have Tropical Depression 12. However, it isn't an imminent threat to land, so it won't be anything to worry about, thankfully. So that's certainly good news. Now, taking a look at what the GFS ensemble members are stating. Of course, the GFS ensemble members are more leaning towards taking this further northward and a more potent storm further northward to where it affects more of the Yucatan Peninsula. Of course, Honduras and Belize could get involved, Guatemala as well. So even as far north as maybe Cancun, you need to pay close attention to this, and potentially even into the southern Gulf of Mexico, you would at least want to be aware of the scenario that this could move northward and become a powerful hurricane as it does so. And taking a look at the model track guidance, we still do see a decent amount of them wanting to take this further southward closer to Nicaragua. So Nicaragua, you need to pay close attention to that possibility as well. Now, here's the model intensity guidance, and this is what concerns me because a majority of the ensemble members want to take this to hurricane status, and we have, I'd say, pretty much a majority of them taking this a major hurricane status, which is definitely extremely concerning, and hopefully this doesn't end up being correct. But based on what we're seeing with the conditions that are ahead for this storm, it definitely isn't looking very good, as there is a possibility this could develop into a major hurricane. Now, taking a look at my forecast, my track and strength forecast when it comes to potential tropical storm Karl. So I do expect this to gradually intensify over the next several days, not really rapidly intensify. I do expect this to attain tropical storm status between Thursday and Friday, and then slowly strengthen from there. And while I did put the max intensity at 90 miles per hour, which is still a category 1 hurricane, which is still very powerful, but the reason there is still that possibility that we could see a major hurricane. So don't underestimate the possibility that we could see a major hurricane, because it is just my forecast as of right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more confidence that this will develop into a major hurricane. So make sure to keep in mind that possibility. Pay close attention to this if you're in Central America, because this could be a very powerful hurricane at landfall. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.